Welcome to Electric Downtown Inspiration and Development. I am photographer John Ball. I made this body of work that you're about to see. This presentation is designed to talk about the creative process that I took to create this portfolio, the streams of influence that I followed in order to create it, and to talk about the trajectory of the project and where it went and where I hope it will go. But I hope this helps you feel inspired in your own work, and it gives you just an insight of how one working photographer gets the job done. My Insta is John Ball Photo. So come follow me if you want. I post images I make of new work and other things that are happening. This work was shown last summer in Austria at the Leica Gallery. It says here, Leica store, Wien Seilergasse. That the word Wien actually is what they call Vienna in Austria in Germany. Anyway, I worked with a nice woman over there named Miriam Marzura. She was the gallerist that helped me get the show. It was a group show with a couple of the photographers, and it was a real thrill to be there. She invited me to speak at that exhibition. It was July or June of 2023. And so this is the presentation that I presented at that time. And I wanted to showcase where I came from in order to do this presentation. I had a pretty good attendance there. There were about 25 people, and they were very engaged and had a great time visiting with them. But here is what it looks like to go from the Leica store in Austria all the way to my hometown in Boise, Idaho. My wife and I made the trip, and we had a really nice time. The weather was good. But here we are going all the way to the western part of the United States to Boise, Idaho. Boise is the state capital of the state of Idaho, and it's a beautiful town. This is a shot of the downtown area, not my photograph, but this is another picture in East Boise showing the river and the mountains. Boise is kind of a hidden gem, and it's being found by lots of people recently. It's under a lot of growth. This is where it is in the state of Idaho, and you can see it's close to Washington and Oregon. We're only about 40 miles from Oregon from where I sit. I have been photographing this area for many decades. I grew up here. I went to high school here, raised my family here. I'm an Idahoan. Actually, I'm a seventh generation Idahoan. And this particular photograph here is one in a series I'm still working on now. I titled Private Idaho. And it represents locations in the area that are personal to me, that I feel a connection with. Every location has, everyone takes something different from a location or connects differently with the location. So my attempt in this portfolio is to show places that mean something to me that I connect with. This is one of those places. This is just south of Boise, about 50 miles on the Snake River. The Snake River is a large river that flows all the way from Yellowstone National Park through the southern part of Idaho and then northward into the Columbia River. This particular area is Guffey Bridge. It's a bridge built in the late 1800s for mining, pulling ore out of Silver City, which is, just south of this location. But it's a beautiful spot. The river is really gorgeous and a lot of fish. I do a lot of fishing in my boat and on my kayaks throughout the summer. And the rocks scattered around in the foreground in this picture, those black basalt rocks, were tear out from the Bonneville flood, which happened about 17,000 years ago. And when the Bonneville River or Bonneville Lake in Utah breached one of its borders and flooded down through the Snake River Canyon, it just tore the sides of the canyon up and deposited these stones like so many pebbles flowing in a river. Some of them are as large, as big as a car. But anyway, I like the geology of this area. I do this work with a view camera. This is my 5x7 large format camera. This is my main ride. This is what I do most of my fine art photography with. It is a wonderful instrument. I learned how to use it while I went to photography school in Santa Barbara, California in the 90s. I attended a school called Brooks Institute of Photography. At the time, it was a very prestigious school, and when I graduated in '98, it was sort of the start of the decline of that school with digital technology and other factors that came into play. So I kind of got the last tail end of the best of that school and received great training. And a lot of that training was about these cameras, these large format cameras. And if you're not familiar with these things, it's basically just a box with a lens in the front, and in the back you put film. The film is cut into sheets that sits in holders. The advantages to this camera over maybe your average digital camera is the resolution and the depth of the image is intensely beautiful with these, because the film on this camera is 5x7 inches. So it packs a lot of detail, a lot of nuanced gradations. My entire photographic system is based on the 5x7 sheet of film, from my camera down to my scanner and my darkroom. And when you build out a system to create photographs and to create photography, you have to think about your end product. You have to think about how you're going to produce from start to finish something that's useful. I sell a lot of prints in Boise. Like this is another photograph in Boise of the foothills. I did a lot of mountain biking in these foothills in the 80s while I was in high school. And I have a connection to these foothills. This is an example of what the photographs I sell, or the prints I sell locally, look like. This is a 40x60 print. It's framed in unfinished walnut. And I do sell quite a few of these, because people are interested in local content. You know, people move here to Boise from other places, mostly Seattle, California, and bigger cities, looking for something different, and they really embrace the environment and the lifestyle in Boise when they move here. And I'm there to meet them with prints. I have them for stores, and I go to home shows and all kinds of places where I meet clients and sell prints. Here's another example of the work of my Private Idaho portfolio. I really like this photograph. It shows the layers of geology and the twisting South Fork of the Boise River. This is another place that is, special to me. It's not far from my home, actually. And I've been on this road many times. Boise also has a very, very nice river. It is called the Boise River. It flows right through the middle of town. It's a medium-sized river. This is a little channel or a little offshoot of that river. And I'm always looking for opportunities to photograph in there and to show the wildness of the river. This is a place where there's no development. Along lots of the river, there are homes and manicure grass, and the river hasn't been preserved nearly as well as I had hoped it would be. But I took this photograph in 2017 during fire season. There's always big, massive wildfires north of here in the desert, in the forests, and the smoke blows into the valley and creates this kind of ethereal look. So when that smoke blows in, I know it's time to get my camera out and go find some images. In progress of shooting this portfolio, I started in earnest in 2016 and shot that for about a year and a half, pretty regularly. I started to get an itch to photograph something besides the landscape. And when I went to photography school in the 90s, one of the best assets at the school at Brooks Institute was their library. They had a lot of photographic monographs and really good photography books that you could check out and look at. I spent a lot of time in there looking at images and building a mental catalog, a mental database of images. This is one of those photographs. This is a German photographer named Thomas Struth. This is his photo of Shinjuku, Tokyo, way back in 1986. So I would suspect he shot this with a large format camera, probably 8x10. And I've always liked this picture, just the graphical nature of it and the compression of the buildings. So this photograph was on my mind. I actually bought one of these books, or a lot of his books over the years. So I have this opportunity to browse this. Another Struth image is Dieselstrasse, Duisburg in 1985. So as I'm photographing the landscape and all these organic shapes, I'm starting to crave something more rigid, more square, and a different challenge. And so this picture really had a great deal of influence on me. Not only does it have kind of a faded background, probably with fog or smoke, but I'm guessing fog, but I like the way he uses these street lamps as compositional devices to pull your eye toward the left side of the image, and it kind of circulates that way. So I really like this image and the overall feel of it. It looks like an early morning. I found that I was doing these photographs walking around cities that early morning is a good time. Specifically Sunday morning. There's no one out. There's no traffic. There's no people. So you can kind of do what you want at that time. I've always loved this picture also. This is another Struth. This is an older one, 78. And in New York City, I really love this photo actually. It's beautiful. And it has the same kind of vibe with these buildings and I don't know, it's kind of a sad picture really. It's very dirty. Look, I can't believe New York City was that dirty. You'd never see that now. This is probably a gentrified area. But another influential picture that I thought about and sat in my subconscious mind and tumbled around. This is another one that was a big influence on me. This is Stephen Shore, SO black and white, New York City, 1964. A very similar vibe to the Struth, a little less formal. I think this is probably 35 millimeter, but it's really pretty. Stephen Shore was extremely and continues to be a very influential photographer in the world of contemporary and fine art photography. And here's another one, 69. Yeah, so very old. This picture is what, 55 years old this year in 2024. When I started to develop the idea for this portfolio, I knew I wanted to shoot cityscapes in the manner of Thomas Struth mostly. And because I live in Boise, Idaho, there's limited flights to limited places. And so on the Boise airport website, they have this graphic that shows all of the locations that they fly direct. So with this map, I made a list of cities I would visit. And you can see there's actually quite a few. Las Vegas, San Diego, Los Angeles, many places in California, Austin, Houston, Atlanta. So I had a lot of options, and my thought was what I would do is I'd shoot 10 cities in a short time frame. Hopefully within 2 years I could get all of these photographs done. And if I had a work trip, I would piggyback off of that. I had a work trip in Rochester, New York. That was kind of the start of it. There's no direct flight from Boise to Rochester, but I was in the area. So Rochester, Dallas, Seattle, Las Vegas, Phoenix, Seattle, Chicago, Vancouver, Seattle, Las Vegas. I actually photographed more than this, but this was the initial 10. The reason I did this was because I think it takes, time and effort to see if an idea has legs, if the idea can be fleshed out and you can find out if it's worthwhile. So I think after my 10th shoot in Vegas, I felt like, this is something. I can make something of this, and I enjoy shooting it, and I like the results. So my first shoot was Rochester, August 2016. And Rochester is a medium-sized town, probably a little smaller than Boise. But there's some really nice downtown area that's aged and beautiful. And I thought this brick building was really interesting. This was very early on in this portfolio. Here's an image that I felt was inspired by Struth and Shore, but the cyclist just happened to pull up. I had my camera set up, so I took this image. Here's another picture that I was seeking like a rhythm, and with the elements, this building on the left that slopes down toward the center of the picture, and the one on the right pushes your eye back into the center. This was my homage to Thomas Struth with the street lamp. The sun really is highlighting the street lamp here, but it's another one. And a few months later, I went to Dallas. I had a direct flight there that was a good price, so I paid a visit down there. I thought Dallas was very interesting. Quite a large city with lots of downtown interesting things. Very friendly people also in downtown Dallas. I found that to be probably the friendliest city, but this was early on a Sunday morning. It was just lighting. The sky was just lighting. I think it was a 2-minute exposure or something. This is a picture done over by the Dallas Contemporary Art Museum. I found good opportunities if I climbed the stairs of parking garages or other buildings where there's access. I did also get in some trouble in some parking lot garages where the security guards would rush up and ask what I'm doing, but I usually just explained it. And I carry business cards with me and brochures so they can understand, and I just leave. But I thought this picture was particularly successful. I like pictures that have a lot of things to look at. I'm kind of a little bit the opposite of a minimalist photography. I find that photography mostly, I'd say boring, but uninteresting from my sensibilities. I really felt like this was successful, showing depth and many elements to look at. This is a little more illustrative of an old car parked there in Dallas. And I really just enjoyed walking around with my camera. I was quite the spectacle from time to time, because when you carry a large format camera on your shoulder around the city, you kind of are built-in spectacle, but I felt this one was successful. Here's another photograph I did on a parking garage. And it kind of has the elements I'm looking for. Lots of things to look at. A rhythm with the composition. The next city was the very next month in Seattle. And of course, I headed right for the Space Needle. I've been to Seattle many times. Boise's pretty close, but I had such a good time in Seattle. It was a little cold that trip, but the sun was shining and I just enjoyed myself taking photos. The way I would do it is I'd get up in the morning early, usually right before sunrise, and walk around for about 3 hours with my camera. After about 3 hours, I completely lost my focus and had to go back. I'd take a shower and hang out in the hotel room until probably 3 or 4. Then I would go back out and do an evening session. I find that if you shoot all day, well, personally for me, it's not really possible. I need a break. I need to tether myself from the creative process. And maybe it's just the intensity that I work, but I started to see other things on this trip also. I thought this billboard was interesting. I liked all the power lines and all the chaos surrounding it. Here's a picture in Seattle Seattle has lots of layers, as does Chicago. I find that to be interesting always, because you want, ideally in a photo you have foreground, middle ground, and then, background and leading lines, which the train tracks supply that. And then you need to make sure the corners have something interesting in each of the corners, a dead corner. The bottom left corner here is close to that, but that dumpster kind of helps. I like how you can peek through and look under the walkway or the road there into the little white car and minutes away. It's just I like this picture. Another early morning session brought me this picture. This was construction workers building. It ended up being like a pretty nice building. I went back a couple of years later and saw it. Here's another example of some architecture with some lines. I don't mind the power lines. I think they can provide an interesting element in the picture itself. I found myself attracted to sunlight and using sun to highlight different aspects of an image. So I really liked it. Some photographers avoid direct sun. I don't really feel that way. And with large format film, you can really optimize sunlight because there's so much detail if you expose correctly. I expose kind of heavy, meaning I get a lot of shadow detail, and then I underdevelop my film. And for those who aren't familiar with that, the longer you develop film, the more contrasty and negative it is. So if you develop a shorter amount of time, it reduces the contrast, and in turn it allows me to photograph easily in direct sun and get a lot very nice shadow detail. My next shoot was a couple months later in Vegas. Because I live in Boise, Idaho, you know, winters are very cold and long, so I was really happy to go to Vegas in January. And Vegas was a treasure trove of interesting things to see and do. I went to the old part of Vegas over by Fremont Street. I found that to be the most interesting. The main strip, if you've been there, is so grand and so large. So many people. I just could not really. I just really struggled. And there are a lot of security guards and people watching over you, and as opposed to this old part of Vegas where it just seems like anything goes almost. Here's another picture in Vegas. This one ended up being probably my most popular piece from the series. And this was on a Sunday morning. And on the right side, it's a club. And I would suspect the night before there was a lot of people hanging around in front of there. But I used that street lamp as a central element, kind of pulling it all together. And that picture was successful, I felt. There's lots of other pictures that I did there. Of course, these are just the ones that I enjoyed. I would shoot all morning, 3 hours, and get about 12 pictures. And then I'd go back to the hotel and change film in the dark room and then do another 12. That's 6 holders because you get 2 sheets of film per holder. Interestingly, that limitation really allowed me to explore this project fully. I know it seems kind of strange, but when you put a box around your projects and you put limitations on it, it actually increases your ability to be creative. And that was the case here. Las Vegas again. I went 7-8 months before I shot any more of this portfolio. Chicago in September. This was one of my favorite trips actually that I took on this. The weather was gorgeous and Chicago is so interesting. Lots of things to see, big buildings, people, and the Chicago River. And that's the Mercantile Building. So I just really enjoyed myself. I shot most of these with a 180 millimeter lens, which if you divide that by 4, which is what you do for 5x7 photography, it's about a 45 millimeter lens. And with large format, what you do is 5x7, you take the focal length divided by 4, and that's the equivalent in 35 millimeter. With 4x5, you divide it by 3, and that's 35, and then of course 8x10 is divided by 6. So this is a 180 millimeter lens divided by 4. It's 45 millimeters. It's a Fujinon. It's remarkably sharp and light, easy to use. Here's another Chicago picture. I got a little bit of street light peeking out there on the right side. I felt like this was a particularly successful picture. This is on an overpass over in, I can't remember which exact area. You can kind of tell there's a Sears Tower, but I would jump in an Uber and just say, hey, drop me off, you know, at this overpass, and had a camera on a tripod. I was just quite a sight, to be honest, but I didn't really care. I was having so much fun shooting these images. Everyone who goes to Chicago has to shoot this building. It's such a lure. But when the sun was raking across it like that, I couldn't really resist it. And the sign that had Chicago there. There's so much to see and photograph in Chicago. And from Boise, it's a 3.5-hour direct flight. So it's very convenient. It's easy to get a Uber or take the L into town and just start shooting. There's another look toward downtown and the Sears building. They were working on this project. It was a condo, Wolf Point West, I think it says there on the sign on the left. It's completed now, but I thought that was really successful. I got this picture at a restaurant, a balcony, or not a balcony, but a patio on a restaurant. And I actually shot there 3 times. They started getting kind of annoyed with me because I kept wanting to go back and reframing the picture. My next trip, and actually my final trip with my large format camera, was in Vancouver the very next month. And I scanned the proofs for this one instead of the film just to see what the difference was, and they look pretty similar, but I flew with my camera to Vancouver I have like a case, like a hard case, and somehow it broke. Like literally it broke. A piece of the wood on standard broke in half. So when I got there, I rented a car and went to a hardware store and got some wood glue and clamped it and watched TV for a day because you can't use them if they're broken, obviously. And then after I got that repaired, I had my camera in the trunk of my car and my film holders in little bags. I just happen to have a film holder in my back seat, a film holder bag that holds some film holders. Someone broke the window and stole my film holders, and so I lost 12 images. It was very frustrating. I kind of got a little burned out with traveling with my large format camera on this trip. But yet I still got some interesting stuff. This is kind of a dystopian scene that with a dappled light through I think it was through a cloud. Vancouver's just filled with these luxury condo apartments, and this is one of those scenes. This picture, I did like this picture, not that much, but it had a big black mark. I'm not even sure what that's from, to be honest. So I was really enjoying shooting all these pictures and visiting the cities and pause it. In the process of shooting these pictures, I was trying to find something to do with them. Hang on, I gotta look again. Where's this going? Okay. I produced all these works, and I'll get to the picture on the screen here in just a moment, but I made prints, and I took the prints to a portfolio review in Palm Springs Photo Festival. I did actually quite a few of these portfolio reviews, but I was, looking to get some traction with them or do something with them, maybe get them published or get a gallery or something. And the reviewers all kind of said the same thing to me. These are boring. Like, these have been done to death. Like, these are not interesting. And of course, that was their opinions at the time, and I understood that, but I felt like they were, there was some truth to what they were saying. Like, these in 1980 and 1970, those pictures were unique and interesting, but now they're just not as much, and there wasn't a lot of interest, and it was a kind of a difficult time to show the work, and like, if you're in the creative process and you're an artist, you understand what rejection can do. I did feel some rejection, but I started to think about the pictures and what they were to me, and what I meant by them, meaning what they meant, what I was trying to communicate. And down to it, I wanted to show the urban jungle and what we've created. I wanted to show how humanity has built up these places that we live, and they just are, and to document them in a way that was respectful and interesting. So that's what I wanted to do. That's what I wanted to show. Years before that, I was a portrait photographer, and I worked with a guy named Philip Stewart Cheris. And, I have a family, I've got children, I had to make a living, so I was doing portrait photography. And actually, I loved it. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Anyway, Philip Stewart Cheris was a creative, very active photographer. At the time I met him, he was in his early 80s. I actually bought his photo studio from him, his portrait studio, and ran it for a while. But he had a tremendous influence on me. And not to speak from the portraits, this was an example of his work. He did these very formal, stylized portraits for mainly wealthy clientele in California, Southern California, Orange County, California. And I loved doing them. They were really fun. But he also did some other work. Here's another example of that he abstracted parts of these images, and he would scan the images and put them in Photoshop and just kind of play with the photographs to get a little different vibe from them. And this is an example of that. And at the time he showed this work to me and I saw it, it never really meant much to me. I thought it was kind of weird, honestly, but it sat in my mind. I mean, the confluence of all these influences, whether it's a German photographer from the 80s or an 80-year-old photographer in the 2000s, those things sit in your subconscious and they mix and they ferment and new things come out of them if you allow it. Another image that I've always liked and just in general is the pop art by Andy Warhol, and just like the different idea of using color and challenging perceptions. And one day I was sitting at my computer trying to figure out what I was going to do, and I was looking at this image and I thought, I wonder if I like just did something different with it. So I put it into Photoshop and changed all the tones and came up with this. I thought, well, that's a different image. That's like a different idea. This looks more like an album cover or something. Like it has, once you abstract it to this point, it has a different meaning. And so I started to play around with these images and change them. And I started to really get into it and had a fun time. And I made so many versions of all these pictures, hundreds of versions. Some were successful, some were, I don't feel like this is very successful. This one I thought was really interesting. Because it's large format film, the sky isn't evenly developed. It's just not possible to do that. So you get this really kind of crazy sky and tonality. And the pictures started to change. They had a different life of their own. You can see how they change meaning, they change everything about them. And so I was really enjoying myself making these images different and adding some new life to them. And like I said, some were successful, some weren't. And as I did this process, I had a portfolio review about a year from the point where I started to do these pictures. So, you know, I knew I had some time to make a portfolio like this that I could show. The portfolio review was the end of 2018 that was coming up. I thought that was kind of a fun image, something different. This is another image in Seattle. I really like this image as a black and white, actually, but I got rid of the freeway and kind of did this to make it look a little more menacing. This is also in Seattle. I thought that was very successful. The green set against the blue was really nice. You can see the graphic on the thing on the ear a little better. And then this one came around. And this was when I was like, okay, this is something. Like this could go somewhere. This has some legs. This particular image right here. This wasn't very successful. I thought that was really cool. It has a kind of compressed look to it. I underexposed the image, so not intentionally, but I just happened to bump the shutter speed up a little bit, and so the negative's really thin, but it gives you that really kind of distressed look. That was also very distressed. I prefer the black and white in this one, but I thought this one was interesting, the way the shadows had that really kind of a teal color in the shadows and the sunlight. Anything the sunlight struck was that yellow gold color. That's kind of an exciting picture. Reminds me of like a Chinese red thing or something. So these are the images that had already, I did what, 4 or 5 shoots up till now. And so I was having a field day creating a new look from all my existing images. I thought this was interesting with you didn't even detect the breaks in the clouds. But once you do that, I'll go back. Yeah, you can see they just like nice clouds in the background. Once I put that in there, it changed the image a lot. So these are the Vancouver pictures. As I went through my progress, I met with a photographer named Todd Heido at a workshop in Bowen Island with Photophic. And he was a very interesting guy. I enjoyed his workshop a lot. And what I took away from his workshop was this sense of mystery and kind of a dark images. If I were to classify Todd Heido, I'd say he photographs images that are pregnant with possibilities. He photographs images that are like little movie sets in a way. I think that's just his natural thing he's looking for. He's looking for something interesting and moody. This is from his house hunting series, which is sort of just world renowned at this point. It's incredible. So I took one of my pictures, which again, this is Seattle, and I thought I'm going to make it a little darker. So this was the first version I did before I met with Todd Hido. I'm going to just put more black in there and kind of darken it down, make it a little more mysterious. So here's the version I had before that, and here's after. And I felt like I was evolving these towards something more significant. So that was before, and then that's after. Another Seattle picture. That was after. You might say I just added more black, but it kind of gave the image a much more settled feeling. And I feel like they were more cohesive. After the trip to Vancouver, I decided I probably shouldn't shoot these large format images in travel. I didn't want to break my camera again. And so I got a medium format Leica camera. This is the Leica S007. It is an incredible device. The images are stunning from this camera. And honestly, these days, they're not very expensive. You could probably get one of these for a few $1,000s with a lens. And even though it's 37.5 megapixels, it is remarkable. It's an incredible camera. Anyway, that became my camera that I was going to travel with. So in June of 18 was my first Leica trip. This is from the same balcony as the other image I talked about previously. You can tell it's just different with a digital camera. You can't control perspective as easily if you do it later in Photoshop, but it just created a different image. But one that was, I thought, equally as interesting is the film pictures. This is also from that first trip to Chicago. I straightened out the lines that added this, got rid of the signage on that building to make it more anonymous. This was in Chicago. There's a whole underground road system near downtown next to the river. I enjoyed walking around with my digital camera with more freedom to shoot in low light, and did this picture. This one's also kind of really popular in this series. This is actually near Soldier Field in the parking area. Oh. Some Seattle pictures. I showed this one already, but this was in that trip. And then it evolved a step further. And I went to Vegas in January again to warm up, and it rained the entire time I was there, which is very unusual in Vegas, being in the desert. But I drove around and was a menace to society and took pictures. Here's that same location, maybe 2 years later, with my digital camera. Straighten it out. That's what I got. I still prefer the film version and look at this image, or that image, but it's another look at it. Then finally, in December of 19, I did a final trip to Seattle. I went to Seattle 3 times. It's a 45-minute flight. Well, no, it's about an hour and a half, but it feels like 45 minutes flying to Seattle. It's as easy as could be. This is the location where, if you remember, the images said aquarium. In the time that I went back, they had removed that entire thing. There's no trace of it. I thought I liked this image a lot, actually. Kind of a lonely train track. And when I add the colors, it takes it somewhere else. Later that year, I moved my family to France for 9 months. We had a little sabbatical we were taking. And I photographed the same series and doing the same thing in France. This time, again, through a car window. This is an influence from Todd Hido. He does a lot of that. And if you've seen his work, you know what I'm talking about. But it's really fun. France had a whole different vibe. Narrow streets, these ancient buildings. This one actually was really popular among some of the people in Toulouse, France, I should say. So in the middle of all this, I did another portfolio review with Paris Chong. Paris Chong is the gallerist at the Leica Gallery LA. And I went with this portfolio, obviously hoping that I could find a gallerist that would be interested or a publisher. And I sat down with her and she said, "Does anyone show this work?" I said, "No." She said, "Well, I want it. So if you want to work with me, let's do this." And I was thrilled. It really is difficult to get a gallery and an exhibition and to get someone to believe in your work. And that process that I went through, which took over 2.5 years, was paying off. I was going to have an exhibition. We planned on the exhibition April of 2020. And, what happened? COVID happened. And 2 years later, after that, so April of 22, we finally had the exhibition. And here's what the finished works look like in that exhibition. I was thrilled. The work was well received. That's where I met other people from Leica. And it was just so much fun, so exciting. So I had a group exhibition with myself and another photographer. It was just such a thrill to show the work and to be there. And here's more of the same. Many of the images were, like I said, well received. I didn't sell any, which was a real bummer, but I felt successful only because I had done it. I had fulfilled my desire to get the work out there. And I'm still getting it out there. I do lots of other work also, and I was working on other projects at the time. This is an image from White Sands National Monument. And I photographed these sand dunes with a prism in front of the lens to give it kind of an alternate look. Here's some of that work. So this is also a portfolio I'm working on and trying to get out. And so I'll talk about this one later, but I just thought I'd include it. I have other work I'm doing also. I'm just going through these quickly, but I started photographing the sand dunes basically at night. My Leica S and nearly any digital camera has such sensitivity. You can do this. You can almost shoot at night. This is the moonlight. Another portfolio I'm working on, I'm actively kind of concluding, is a portfolio of work in Tunisia. I went there with, when I lived in France a few times, and I went with a friend of mine who was a videographer, and he got this really nice little video of me shooting in the desert. So I have a lot of different portfolios I work at. The way I see it is it's kind of like writing books. You're just writing, you're working, you're adding to the depth of it, and you're just continuously making new work. And as a photographer, that's what you do. My hope is to be a fine art portrait photographer and speak and write and be able to present ideas and talk about creative process with other photographers and other interested people. So as this video concludes, I want to thank you for spending a few minutes with me. I hope this was insightful. Comment if you have any questions. Follow me. I'll be putting more of these presentations in YouTube. And I really appreciate your time and attention. This was a little group that I was photographing on this trip. I've been there 3 times. And they were just so much fun. The camels just walk and walk. They walk right behind the camel boss, who is the leader of this group. He had his 2 kids with him, which I found to be so much fun, so interesting with children. But some of these images are on my website. You can go and check it out, johnballphotography.com. But photography is great, isn't it? It's so much fun to shoot, meet people, and travel. I've enjoyed it tremendously. So thanks for watching, and look for other opportunities to hear about my work or see my work on my YouTube channel, Insta, and any other place.